and welcome. I'm interviewing Cody Reeves of Kentwood, Michigan for the Grand Valley State Veterans History Program. My name is Cody Leroy Rollins, and let's go ahead and get started. So, we're going to start off with where were you born and what was your childhood like before you joined the military?
So I was born in Grand Rapids, local here, and then I was raised in the small town just outside of Belding called Smyrna. My mother and I lived with my grandparents. My father wasn't in the picture, and it was a little bit of a broken home. Um, I got along with my grandparents very well. I didn't get along with my mother very well. She was busy with college and work, but overall, I had a good childhood. We weren't, below the poverty line, or we didn't struggle or anything like that. But I didn't have many friends growing up until about high school, when I started participating in sports and after-school activities. From Smyrna, we moved to Orleans when my mother got married to my stepfather, Aaron, who was a Marine veteran himself. And I think that partly what helped me choose the Marine Corps when I was determining my branch of service, because I looked at all the options. I sat down with a recruiter from every branch, and I saw what they all had to offer. And the Marine recruiter was the only one that told me it was going to be difficult. And at that point in my life, I was trying to challenge myself to become better. I had just graduated high school with, I think, less than a 2.0 GPA. I didn't even walk at graduation. No college would take me. And my only option was a dead-end job at this local grocery store, which is a great grocery store, but there wasn't much room for improvement there.
Yeah.
So I joined the delayed entry program for the Marine Corps, and it took me about a year before I could get to boot camp because I was so overweight and out of shape. And there was also the ASVAB that we had to study for.
Yeah.
They still do that testing.
That's the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, right?
Yes. That's the test that will help determine which MOS best fits you. Some jobs have certain score requirements based off of skills and abilities that you may have.
Yeah.
But during the delayed entry program, I recruited out of Grand Rapids North, and the North and the South both had their own recruiting station, but we met every Wednesday for what we called warrior training, and it was a little bit of a precursor to boot camp. We started learning our knowledge about Marine Corps history and getting into physical shape. We called it PT, which is just physical training. And it was fun. Whoever was the most physically shaped for that day, or could do the most pull-ups for that session, would be called the guide, and they got to carry the flag for the run. And then we always ran in teams of 2.
Okay.
We would do exercises, team building workouts, competitions. We did all sorts of things. We ran 5Ks together, like the Riverbank Run. We did lots of things, and it was 2 to 3 hours once a week, and then we would do a Saturday once a month for like a fun event where we would do like frisbee golf or ice skating in the winter or whatever.
Did they ever make it like extra difficult for you because you were out of shape, or were they like understanding?
Well, it wasn't like they were extra difficult. It was more of they gave you the information that you needed, and they helped you along the way, but it was ultimately your drive and your motivation that got you where you wanted to be. They pushed you, but you were never pushed so far that you would break.
Yeah.
But they have to push you because your mental state will stop before your physical body ever stops. So you need the push to actually get the improvements that they need. But after about a year, I had lost like 60 pounds, and I went from doing no pull-ups to 23 pull-ups, and I went from doing like 40 sit-ups to 120 sit-ups, and
That is quite the improvement.
then I got to basic training, and I was no longer Like, I thought I was in great shape, but by the time you get to basic training, you're not in as great shape as you think you are.
Yeah.
I had made so much progress, but the standard for the Marine Corps physical fitness is pretty high. Um,
Where did you go to basic training at?
I went to basic training in San Diego, California,
Okay.
um, which was great because after I had finished basic training, they changed the method that they use, and I would have had to have gone to Parris Island if I enlisted any later.
Where's Parris Island at?
That's in South Carolina.
Oof. Yeah. California's definitely the better option.
Oh, it was way better. But going into basic training, I was still trying to cut weight because I was still over the weight limit because I was so short that the weight limit was like 160. And any muscular guy will tell you that it's hard to maintain 160 at 5'6". You'll almost always be over that. But the Marine Corps has like procedures like body weight percentage, and you can tape out.
Yeah.
But to get to basic training, you actually had to make weight. So I was cutting weight, and then it was the flight over there, and then before you actually do your initial physical testing, there's 3 to 4 days of processing where they already start the psychological games by not letting you sleep, and you're just put in lines, and you wait in line to go through dental, to go through health screening, physical checkups. They get you all the admin paperwork done, next of kin, you got the SGLI, and then gear issue, and the whole because there's so many people being processed, it takes a couple days, and it kind of breaks you down, which is what they're going for. The whole goal of breaking someone down to build them back up to what you need them to be. And you go into what's called a holding platoon before you're actually in the platoon that you'll stick with through basic training.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny. So when you're in the holding platoon, they're not quite like drill instructors then. They still lead you around, and you get everyone, the drill instructors get everyone dressed together and showered together quickly and efficiently, but they're not quite yelling at you or drilling you, or they're not, because you're still in that processing state. But as soon as that's over, you do your initial test, and then they call it Black Friday when you actually meet your drill instructors. And it was a pretty life-changing moment for me. That was, up until that moment, I had only thought that, okay, this is going to be hard, but I could do this. And then Black Friday came, and my opinion changed, and I was like, this is terrifying. This is not what I knew. This is nothing like I expected. And I had heard many stories and watched YouTube videos, but once you're actually there, it's quite different.
Yeah.
It's a lot of controlled chaos. Looking back at it now, if I had to go through it again, it would be easy because I know all the psychological games, and I know the tricks, and I know what they're doing. But at the time, just 18-year-old Cody was terrified. Black Friday starts off with your senior drill instructor introducing the 4 sub-drill instructors.
Okay. So you had 5 overall.
You have 5 overall, or I had 5 overall. It differs from platoon to platoon.
Okay.
So the senior drill instructor is in charge of all of them, while as each drill instructor has a specific duty. There's one drill instructor for actual drill, marching. There's one for rifle marksmanship. There's one for knowledge, like studying history and passing the final test at basic training. And then there's another one that doesn't actually talk and just goes around yelling. And it's great. That actually serves a very good purpose.
So would he be like going around correcting people, or is he
Yes,
just
correcting
yelling
people.
at people for no
Well,
reason?
no one's ever yelled at for no reason. If you're not doing anything wrong and a drill instructor's yelling at you, it's probably because he's trying to stress you out during some sort of event or test, because nothing in the military is ever done without stress. So they have to simulate some sort of level of stress to know that your body can adapt and handle it. And there's nothing that's ever too much or too far. It feels like a lot, and it's difficult, but these are trained professionals.
Yeah.
There's a whole medical branch on the base. They have a hospital, they have ambulances, there's fire trucks, they have the police department, their own fire department, and their own hospitals. And there's many professionals that go into creating this program that's structured to create a Marine from a regular civilian. And I enjoyed it. It was by far the most challenging thing I've done
Yeah.
in my life up until this point. One thing that I can remember was you always got enough sleep, but it wasn't like you got to choose. You didn't get to choose when you slept, but you got enough sleep. They
Okay.
were they were required to make you sleep for 8 hours, but that meant that everything was rushed. So, like, everyone in the platoon made their bed at the same time, at the same way, got in their bed at the same time, the same way, and went to sleep at the same time, at the same way.
Okay. So, how long was your boot camp?
It was 3 months.
Okay.
I
And
can't remember exactly how many training days. I think it was 70 training days.
okay. And is this like broken down into segments? Like, here's your basic
Mhm.
stuff. Here's where you focus on like rifles.
Yes, it is
that sort of
broken down. There's a really good calendar online that breaks it down day by day, and it shows you the receiving period, the transition period, then it tells you when Black Friday is, and then there's rifle week, swim week, drill week, knowledge week. There's a bunch of different sections, and there's even the last week after you've passed basic training but haven't finished basic training, where you graduate from calling yourself or referring to yourself as a recruit to now referring yourself as a Marine. And it's one of the most satisfying feelings that I can remember. Because just as recruits, you weren't allowed to walk around by your own. But once you were in that last final week, you could go in pairs to the store or to the barber shop just in pairs. And if you went by any drill instructors, instead of calling them a drill instructor, you would call them by their rank. Or instead of calling them sir, you would call them by their rank. And they would refer to you by your rank and name, or no longer as a recruit, as a Marine. And that was like the first moment that I had a sense of pride in what I had accomplished. And at that moment, I hadn't realized what I would go on to do later.
Yeah.
But I was still happy that I had made it. There was a few times where it got rough, and this was the first moment that I had ever been away from my family. So it was a little bit more difficult than I thought. We always had Sundays off. If you didn't do anything on Sunday, then you had to stay in the platoon or stay with the platoon, like studying or working out or doing something like that. But it was free time. It was just structured free time.
Yeah.
They still wanted you to be constructive.
That little bit of freedom makes it even more strict once you get to it, but it makes you more accepting of that strictness, right?
Yes. Yeah. I went to church every Sunday, even though I wasn't religious. It was just nice to go, and it was actually really interesting. The way church was set up is so the whole platoon of 80 people would sign up for whatever their religion was, and then you would write your name down, and then you would all go together, and you'd have to march there in a group of the rest of the people with the same religion. And then we were given directions to the church, and people would be watching us as we went there. But once we got there, it was like a whole different environment. People were singing and cheering, and there was just this overall sense of a really strong bond between everyone. And I didn't know any of these people. They were just all strangers that were doing the same program I was doing, and that alone, through hardship, was enough to create a bond between us. And a lot of people cried.
Yeah.
A lot of grown men cried.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
It was powerful.
Now, I know with Navy boot camp, there's lots of different denominations of churches. Was it just like, the big religions like Christianity and Judaism and Islam, or was there also like smaller religions like Hinduism and Confucianism there? Do you know?
They covered every religion.
Okay.
If your religion wasn't covered, then there was like a fall to church you could go to where they would let you do self practice on your own in a room.
Okay, so like a non-denominational one.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. So once you got out of boot camp, what did you do after that?
So the first step after boot camp is to go to Marine. It's called MCT, which is Marine Combat Training, and there's two different ways that the MCT follow-on school goes. You're either an infantry MOS or you're a non-infantry MOS.
What does MOS stand for?
Military Occupation School.
Okay,
So,
jump.
so the Marine Combat Training is the precursor before MOS School, and if you're a non-infantry MOS, your MCT is 30 to 45 days, and then you actually go to your job schooling. Whereas if you're an infantry MOS, your MCT includes your MOS school, and it's right there in the same place. So because I was a radio operator, I had a non-infantry MOS. My MCT was about a month long. It was in Camp Pendleton, and that was when they really focused on the combat aspect of the Marine Corps, and that was where we learned the strategies for war fighting and how to properly maintain and fire a multitude of different weapon systems.
Okay.
I learned how to shoot the M4, M16 variants, as well as the Mark 240 Bravo machine gun, the 50 caliber machine gun, Mark 19 grenade launchers, and that was as much as I got to train on.
Okay.
If you had an infantry MOS, you would go even more detailed in those trainings, and then they go on to do a few other weapon systems as well.
Okay. And did you go there with your platoon from boot camp, or were you sent there individually?
So you're sent there individually, but you end up seeing a lot of the people that you were in basic training with.
Okay.
Some people are actually lucky enough to go through basic training, MCT, and MOS school all together, and then hit the fleet and get their first duty station together. It's rare, but it does happen.
Okay. So after your combat training, during your combat training, was there any interesting things that happened? Like, did they make you simulate, like, being in a week-long battle or anything like that?
We did lots of drills with blank rounds, and we did lots of practicing in the field, but there was no actual week-long field experiences.
So no, like, simulations or anything?
No. Going back to basic training, though, there was a 3-day-long crucible where we were in the field for 3 days with only one meal that you had to ration out, and you had to carry your own all your own supplies, and you had to travel between location, and that was sort of the culmination of all events, where all knowledge was tested. And the final hike on the last day, after barely sleeping and barely eating and doing all these training and team exercises and tests, and after finishing all that, because we were in San Diego, there's this pretty monumental location at the top of a hill that you hike to, and that's when you receive your Eagle Globe and Anchor. And it was a pretty emotional time for a lot of people there too.
So that's where you officially earn the title?
That's when you
Marine.
officially earn the title.
Okay. So after that, you had your combat training, and where was your MOS school at?
So my MOS school was in 29 Palms, California, and that's where all communication schooling is. 29 Palms is also the home to Camp Wilson, which is where they do ITX, which is integrated training. And that's where all pre-deployment units go.
Okay. Uh, what was your MOS school like? Was it as strict as boot camp, or?
I would say MOS school was less strict than boot camp, but more strict than MCT.
Okay.
We still had to march everywhere. You weren't allowed. You were considered a student status now, so you couldn't have a vehicle. You couldn't drink. Uh, you weren't allowed to like wear civilian clothing yet. Yeah. Um, Classes were every day, Monday through Friday, all day from 8 to 5, with 15-minute breaks between classes. You were required to do like some sort of max set of pull-ups between classes or something to keep you in shape between classes, because there wasn't as much physical training in MOS school.
Yeah.
So to stay in shape, we always did something,
Okay.
whether it was a morning run or some fun activity after classes before studying, or just like little workouts between classes.
Yeah.
The desert heat was rough.
I'll bet. So that's in Northern California then?
No, that's Southern California.
Southern California. Okay. Oh yeah, deserts are in the south. So nothing really eventful happened in your MOS school?
Nothing eventful. I just remember that the material was hard to learn. It was the equivalent to taking a college exam every week for about a month and a half straight. Every week was a subject. They called them annexes, Annex A through F, and the annex would be a radio system that we had to learn to include every detail of how to operate, troubleshoot, fix, and maintain. And the amount of knowledge was about a semester worth of information stuffed into a week and then tested.
Okay. That's pretty...
The failure rate was not super high, but that's because if you didn't pass, you just got sent back a week and picked up with a different
Okay.
platoon to try again.
Was there like a limit to how many times you could be sent back before they just like sent you somewhere else?
I'm sure there was a limit, but when I went through, they were trying to get people, so
Okay.
they would send you through as many times as you need.
Okay. And so it was about 6 weeks? Said annex.
I'd say it was 45 training days.
Okay. After that, where'd you go?
So the last week of MOS school, you get your first orders, and my first duty station was Camp Lejeune, and I got sent to 8th Regiment, which is one of the highest companies you can be sent to. I was at the H&S company for the whole regiment.
What does H&S stand for?
Headquarters and Support Company.
Okay.
And then I spent my first couple months at 8th Reg training just for whatever. At that point, there's really no expectations. It's just kind of like a day job. You show up in the morning, run with your platoon, and then we were all radio operators because it was broken down by section. So all the radio operators would show up in the morning at 6 a.m. We'd run together. We'd go get breakfast. We'd be to work by 9. We'd work until noon. We'd eat until 1. Then we'd work again until 4 and go home. And then you were free until the next day.
Okay.
And then after a couple months, 8th Reg sent me to 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. They were preparing for a deployment to Romania for Black Sea rotational BSURF,
Okay.
the Black Sea Rotational Force.
And what year was this?
This was 2015,
Okay.
about mid-2015. The work, we call them workups before deployment. You do about 6 to 9 months of training for the 9-month deployment.
Yeah.
And I arrived at 1-8 about a month or two into their training, which was fine because I had been training so hard on my own that I was already at their level.
Yeah.
And then I trained with them for the rest of their 3 to 4 months before deployment, and then we went to Romania about early 2016,
Okay.
and we were there for about 8 months.
Okay, so were you in Romania or were you like on a ship near Romania?
We were actually stationed in Romania at an old Army air base. It's called MK. I was a really nice base. I have a lot of good memories there. Um, Deployment life is a little bit different than fleet life. We were 8 to a room with 4 bunk beds and 4 lockers, with shared showers and shared bathrooms. But it was, again, that was a lot like a day job where you would PT in the morning with your section, uh, work from 9 to 5 or 9 to 4, and then go home. But when you were done with work, you were still confined to the base until a certain time that would let you go out in town. Um, and that was fun. Seeing different cultures is great. I got to do a lot of volunteering at an orphanage nearby. It was more of a foster home. Um, these two parents took care of about 18 kids in varying ages, from newborns to 17-year-old kids. And we did a lot of volunteering with them, just spending time with the kids or painting buildings, or played a lot of sports with them.
Okay.
It was a pretty good experience.
So the locals were pretty happy to have you then?
Yes, they were.
I know this was during kind of a tense period between America and Russia.
Yes,
So
this was when everyone was sort of concerned with what Russia was doing, and we were there to deter Russian aggression, and I guess we succeeded because nothing ever happened.
it's a good way to look at it. And yeah, I know a lot of places aren't too happy to have Americans there, but it sounds like the Romanians were pretty happy.
Yeah, they definitely wanted us there. They were glad. We did a lot of training with like the Romanian military as well.
Was that difficult due to language barriers or anything, or did
A
they?
lot of them knew English.
Okay.
So I would say it wasn't that difficult.
Okay. Did you guys have like a Romanian linguist or anything?
Yes, we did. We had a Russian linguist and a Romanian linguist.
Okay. So did anything eventful happen in that deployment, other than working at the orphanage, or?
Nothing.
All right.
Nothing that I can say.
Fair enough. And afterwards, you went back to the States, or?
So yes, coming home from deployment was it was an emotional time coming home. Everyone waits for you, and then you come in on buses, and you have to go to the armory first to drop weapons off. So you drive by everyone waiting for you, and there's like huge party. They've got gazebo set up with tables and food, and they got a bouncy house for kids, and there's hundreds of parents here, and yeah. From there, I went back to 8th Reg, because I was only temporary with 1-8. But I was only with 8th Reg for another couple months before I got sent to 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines.
And this was in 2016, right?
This was in this would have been the middle of 2017.
Okay.
Early to middle 2017.
Okay. And what did you do there?
So at 2-6, it was the same thing I did at 1-8, except now I was 2.5 years of experience with a deployment as an E3. So I was already, top of the gang.
Yeah.
There was not many other people that already had one deployment overseas with 2 years experience and got the type of training and experience that I did. Because when we were in Romania, we were always working and challenging ourselves to do better. And we were talking to Germany and we were talking to Turkey, and so I got really good at what I did.
Yeah, so we were working real close with all of our allied countries over there, essentially.
Yes. And we also worked with the Army.
Okay. Did you have any Navy support out in the Black Sea, or is that sort of?
Yes. So we as the Marine Corps, we take Navy with us wherever we go, but there's also Army medical
Okay.
on the base. But the Navy corpsmen that we take with our platoon, they carry all the medical supplies that we need for a company or a platoon or whatever. But going back to return from deployment in 2-6, when I got to 2-6 H&S Company, I knew by this point that I wanted to be with the infantry. And I requested that, and they told me which infantry companies had platoons that needed radio operators. And because I was the most experienced radio operator in the company, I got to choose where I wanted to go. I chose to go to Weapons Company, Cat Platoon, which is the combined anti-armor team for the Weapons Company. The Weapons Company is the company that has like the heavy gun support for the line companies, which is the ground troops. So we rolled around in Humvees and gun turrets.
Okay.
I won't get into specifically the strategics of how our Cat Platoon worked, but we were in Humvees, and it was convenient, but it was also a curse. We had to sleep in the vehicles, and you had to maintain the vehicles, and they broke down so much, and carrying around 10 guns that large, not even fun.
Where was this at?
So this was still in Camp Lejeune.
Okay.
And I went to them just before they were doing a workup for the 26th MEU. So that workup was a little bit different, and I hit that company a little bit later. So they were over halfway done with their training.
Yeah.
But I had just, recently came off a deployment and was still pretty knowledgeable, so I wasn't really worried. The only thing I had to learn was how to apply this new knowledge and experience that I had to a mobile, vehicle-based unit that they were, which wasn't too hard. The jump in responsibility was crazy. I went from being just one of many ROs in a section to being the only radio operator in charge of the whole platoon. And that meant signing off for a lot of gear, handling my own crypto, doing all my own programming. And I had to also teach everyone in the platoon how to use the gear, because we were in vehicles, we would split up. I'm only in one vehicle.
Yeah.
I can't see and operate all, 24 radios that we had.
Yeah.
Not to mention all of the personal radios that the important people carried, and so I had to do a lot of teaching and explaining,
And
that got.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm assuming these were not just like walkie-talkie shortwave radios, right?
Oh no, these were complicated, encrypted,
Yeah.
brick radios. They were old school, but it was complicated enough to where it was secure.
Okay.
That it was that precise complication of crypto that made them so difficult to operate. Just the radio itself isn't that hard to operate, but
Yeah.
once you start encrypting and securing the net, then it becomes, there's many factors that you have to troubleshoot.
Okay. And you were in charge of all of that.
Yes,
So that's a lot of pressure for, what were you, 20 at this time?
I was 21.
Okay.
Yes, so I went from not being in charge of anything, just operating and doing my job, to actually being responsible for millions of dollars worth of gear. And I maintained a secret clearance working under the NSA, getting crypto from them and putting it in the radios and doing all the proper procedures there.
So that was probably a pretty work-intensive part of your life, huh?
Yeah, it was the most stressful job I've ever had.
Did you ever deploy with that unit? Or?
Yes, we deployed on the 26 MEU, and so the 26 MEU that's like, I'm trying to think of how to put this. So the way the MEU works is there's 3 ships that travel around the ocean, and it's pretty classified. But what I can say is that it's a force in readiness. The MEU is just, they don't have a purpose beyond the purpose of just being ready for whatever the world needs.
It's a reactionary force.
It is a reactionary force. The Marines live by the fact that we can be anywhere the United States needs in 24 hours.
Okay.
Anywhere in the world. And that's because we have like a MEU, which is the Marine Expeditionary Unit, that's always out somewhere doing something. And that's mainly just training. We got to stop in Italy for training, Greece for training, Jordan for training.
Did you ever get to spend any time in these wonderful locations, or were they just
Oh
sort of
yeah.
taunting you?
Oh yeah, we did lots of we called them liberty calls, where you get to come off the ship and just do whatever you want in town as long as you're back by the right time and don't break any laws. That's when the language barriers really did get a little bit rough. Um, but it's not that bad.
Yeah.
It can be overcome.
So, how long were you with the MEU?
That was a 9-month deployment.
Okay. And then you went back to Camp Lejeune?
Yes.
All right. What happened then?
After that deployment, I started doing my transition to like the civilian world. Went through TRS, started like turning in my gear and getting the paperwork ready to actually leave the Marine Corps.
What's TRS?
TRS is the Transitionary Readiness Seminar.
Okay. Do you feel like they actually got you ready to be a civilian, or?
I feel like it is a step in the right direction. They never used to have these programs, and now they do, and they're helpful, yeah. But I feel like me personally didn't learn much because I was taught in high school how to do resumes, and a lot of what they taught us I had already knew, but everything could be improved, and they're working on it.
So after that, you just transitioned out and came back to Grand Rapids?
Then I signed up for Grand Valley and pursuing a degree in psychology.
Okay. And what are you going to do with that?
Well, I'm interested in taking my psychology degree and joining the National Guard to do some sort of behavioral health science as I work towards a master's in psychology.
Okay. So you want to go back as like an officer then?
Yes.
All right. Why the National Guards and not the Marines?
The National Guard offers programs that I can do while in college locally, and
Marines just don't have these programs.
well, they have the programs, but like the specific program that I'm looking for is National Guard is they're the only ones that offer a specific officer commissioning program while still in college.
Okay.
There are many programs in every branch, and specifically for what I wanted to do, I'm thinking the National Guard is the best fit.
Okay. And are you gonna try and retire out of there, or?
Yes, I would like to retire out of. Well, I don't know if I'm going to retire out of the National Guard. Once I commission as an officer, I can transition to any branch.
Okay.
It's just the program to commission as an officer when I graduate is only offered by the National Guard. Otherwise, I'd have to get my degree and then go to officer candidate school, and I don't really want to do that. I've already been to basic training and all these other schools. Going back again and being the lowest man on the totem pole and working my way back up again just isn't required. They have these programs where once I get 90 credits, I can start doing an officer candidate school part-time for 18 months, and then I'll graduate as an officer with a degree, and then I can commission full-time into the National Guard, the Army, the Navy, wherever I want to go, as long as I've fit their requirements.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can do this interview again in about 20 years.
Maybe.
So I'm just going to go over a few more things.
Okay.
Now that we've got pretty much the timeline set up. Can you tell us a little bit more about your job, or is that too?
No, I can do that. So as a radio operator, you're in charge of maintaining, operating, and like taking care of radio gear. There's many different radio systems. The different radio systems have different jobs, and that's based off of the radio frequencies. There's a couple different radio frequency bands. There's high frequency, very high frequency, and ultra high frequency, and these frequency bands overlap a little bit, but typically once you get into a different frequency band, you're going to need a different radio system.
Yeah.
So the trucks had vehicle mounted systems that sat in the front seat in the middle between the driver and the passenger, and It was two radio systems side by side. They were powered by the vehicle, so they had a high amount of wattage, and that produced a stronger signal. And my job was to do the programming, to get the vehicles talking to each other and then talking to whoever we're working with. And then I had to have radios for each individual person that wanted one, and those were on different channels and different frequencies with a different encryption, so that they could talk amongst each other, but it wouldn't interfere with anything that was coming on the radio in the vehicles. And then, like, if we're 100 miles away from the ship, a very high frequency radio system is not going to reach that high, whereas a high frequency radio system could. So you'd have to have a different portable radio system that you could pull out of the truck, set up, and talk back to the ship, once in a while, and then pack it back up, get back in, and leave.
Okay.
So on top of being able to operate these radios, I had to teach everyone else to operate the radios. I had to teach everyone else how to maintain the radios. They broke a lot. So we did lots of preventative maintenance, cleaning, troubleshooting, and many classes of just sitting down and like trying to teach them what I learned in a couple months.
Okay. I bet that was pretty stressful. Because these were just general infantry Marines that you were teaching to do this.
They were all infantry MOSs, yes. That varied from machine gunners to riflemen to missilemen. They all learned very well. It's not material that they were used to seeing, and it wasn't their job. So it's hard sometimes to make someone passionate about something that they don't understand and that they don't see a use for. A lot of them see their job as being a sole operation, meaning the infantry can operate on their own, when in reality, the infantry is supported by the rest of the Marine Corps.
Yeah. Did you ever have any issues, confrontations with them or any of the officers or anything?
I didn't personally have any confrontations, but there was always drama. That's just natural to life and society. There's going to be drama. Nothing that was so bad we couldn't overcome it.
Okay. And I know with the Marines, they kind of hammer in the whole one single cohesive unit.
Yes.
You guys are like an interlocked family.
Yeah.
Almost.
And I'd say overall that was pretty true. Everyone maintained a pretty close bond. We all knew everyone very well, first name basis. I knew everyone's hobbies, what they liked to do, what they didn't like. I knew where they were from. I knew their families, their sisters, their brothers. I was really good friends with their girlfriends, their wives. We were all really close. We all worked together as a team and supported each other.
Okay. That's good. Was it hard to be away from your family?
So when you're deployed to a base, it's easy to get on Wi-Fi and get on Facebook or make a phone call or video chat or whatever. It would be no more difficult than being away from your family back in Michigan. I may not be able to actually go see them, but I can pick up the phone and call them whenever I want.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different when you're on ship. The internet's shaky at best. We go in a lot of different security settings where the ship's not allowed to talk at all. No incoming or outgoing traffic. You go weeks without being able to communicate with anyone other than on the ship. And it's hard sometimes, but then other times it just goes by so quickly that you're so busy you don't realize that you haven't talked to your parents in months.
Yeah. Especially on the ship where you don't even get any off days, right? You're just kind of going.
Yeah, you get off days, but even your off days are still, you're still on ship and you still have to contribute to ship life.
Yeah. How bad was the food on the ships?
It was terrible. They tried their best to make good food, and sometimes they did. Sometimes we would stop in Italy and they could pick up some steaks or lobsters, and it was great. But for the most part, it was just pretty standard. I mean, it wasn't terrible or unedible, but
Yeah.
it's not a 5-star meal.
It's about as good as you can get with powdered eggs.
Yes.
Do you have any issues with the Navy while you were on there?
I personally didn't have any issues with the Navy. I enjoyed the Navy. I made a lot of friends. There were issues between the Marines and the Navy, just because of different culture and just the way that we were brought up, I guess, the differences. But we didn't have any huge issues.
Okay. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Not that I can think of.
All right. So you got out in 2018, right?
Yeah, I got out in November of 2018.
And I can tell you've been going to Grand Valley State, so it's good.
Just-
One last question that we always try to ask everybody. Knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
Yes.
Just in a heartbeat, yes?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, that's good to know. Maybe we'll sit down and talk again some other time, but looks like that's it for us today.
Thank you.